our house was burgled that night, and my first concern was the watch, rather than anything else in the house.
Hello and welcome back to the Shreve Crumpelo YouTube channel. I'm your host Brian, and today we are at the Newberry Hotel with a very special guest, Dr. Tom Barnes.
Brian, thanks for having me. I'm very excited to do today. I hope my collection will be worthy of people's time.
Tom, so what got you into watch collecting?
The first watch I ever owned, my mother bought me when I was in my early teens. She said, a young man should have a watch, but I don't even remember what brand that was. When it started, I think, more seriously, was I had a friend as a teenager who used to come to school with these avant-garde watches, or things that were pretty crazy. And I think he was the first kid in the school who had a Casio, for example, just as they came out. And it says how long ago that was. But I used to borrow his watches, because he had, and take them home. Interestingly, one of the interesting pieces I had, which I had kept overnight, our house was burgled that night, and my first concern was the watch, rather than anything else in the house. So that was sort of a first glimpse to me of the watches. Always fascinating. This was still at a time when I was wondering, when you have a date on a watch and it goes round once, how does it know to skip? I understood that once it hit 12, it seemed logical to me that the date would advance. But when it goes to a second time, how does it know to skip it the next time? I just couldn't conceive of it being that clever that it would figure that out. So then when I read this article about grand complications around perpetual calendars, which actually even know not only which day and month it is, but will keep track, that kind of began to blow my mind. And discussions of tourbillons to counteract the force of gravity. It's like I'm just this kid and I'm going, what? Minute repeaters just seemed astounding. That sort of began a real interest in horology, in complications, and in what is possible to squeeze into such a small space. And then I used to love looking at watches, window shopping as a kid, and around that time the Piaget Polo, the original Piaget Polo, was getting very popular. I remember seeing it in a store and thinking it was like the most beautiful execution of a watch I had ever seen. But again, it's all very much admiration at a distance. So then I used to think about dress watches. I really became very focused on dress watches. I tried to conceive of what would be a perfect dress watch. And finally I saw one in a window in Edinburgh, of all places, still relatively young, still not being able to afford any watch. I guess I had much more expensive taste than I had means to support, but I thought, that's the watch, that's it, that's the perfect dress watch. Many years later, when I had the means to start collecting, in some ways I went back and started addressing some of these long-held passions and watches that I had been interested in for some time. So that's, it's in a way, it's sort of a self-induced or a spontaneous interest in watches, but it kind of started with my friend Greg growing up.
With the Casio.
With the Casio. And
the Patek you saw in the window is on the table here.
Right, an example, not the exact one, but an example. So this is the 3893, which comes in a couple of different dial formats. This is the less common one. It's a mechanical movement. It's a simple three-hander with a small seconds. It has a lovely clou de Paris design on the stamped dial, but it has these beautiful black hands. And indeed, if you look closely, you can almost see it right now, that the minute hand ends exactly where the hour indices begin. So when they line up, it forms this continuous line all the way through. I call this like a tuxedo watch, because the watch itself looks like it has that sort of spare simplicity and elegance of a tuxedo. And it's also just not a Patek that's often seen.
Yeah, it's a very contemporary styled watch for its time. What year did you end up acquiring that?
So I acquired that really only a couple of years ago. So that was a bit of an internet search to find a really nice example of that.
And you were looking for a piece from that period of time when you were a young man, window shopping and having this aspirational goal of buying one of these beautiful men's gold dress watches.
Exactly. I remembered it was a Patek, and I was going off the memory of it because I didn't know the serial number. So I was hunting for it. And because it's not a very common dial, it was like, no, that's not it, no, that's not it, no, that's not it. Finally, I found that. That's it.
But it was ingrained in your psyche.
Yes,
maybe.
exactly.
Where did you find it?
I found it on Chrono 24, interestingly. There's a lot of Calatravas on Chrono 24 to flip through, so it just requires a lot of painstaking diligence to get through all of them.
Was it in the United States?
This watch was not in the United States. I think this was either in Germany or Switzerland.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did it take a lot of effort to get to the United States?
No, it wasn't too bad. It was a pretty good process through Chrono 24. I've had a number of watches come from Europe with Chrono 24, and it's usually been pretty good.
So this little Patek you were able to find via the internet, via Chrono 24 in Europe. You know, you have a lot of watches out here on the table today. Where do you find that you are acquiring most of these timepieces?
These days, I'm doing it mostly through dealers and through direct relationships. It's something that I think adds a lot more of a fun dimension to the collecting experience. Every time you go into a store, you're not there to buy a watch, but you're interacting with the very informed people in those stores. They're telling you about the pieces. You get to try them on. Of course, as many people say, there's nothing like seeing a watch in the metal. You may see one, it may look interesting, but then you have to sort of try it on to really know if it might be for you. It's just very pleasurable, I think, to go to stores, and of course it's very convenient here in Boston. There's so many fine stores all in a small area, so you can be quite efficient at going through all the different stores, paying respect, saying hi to everybody, and that's, I think, a much richer experience.
So in looking at the table here and talking about a little bit more of, I would say, your obscure watches, you know, we have the Platinum Sonograph on the table. Because this is a very unique and special watch, just to preface.
It's fairly rare. It was made for about 10 years, from I think 2007 to 2017. By all accounts, only a couple of pieces per year. This watch was delivered in 2018, so it may in fact be the last one that was assembled. It's just a magnificent piece. To the extent that this aligns with my sort of background, which is scientific and technical, with a watch like this, which is able to measure hundredths of a second, hence the Sonograph, that's what made it particularly appealing. And there's a few other watches on the table that do interesting things, which have drawn me to them. For example, the Resonance with its COSC orbital system, which is just very cool. Even something like this, which is possibly the most affordable watch on the table, which is this Luminox. But I really dig the fact that it's illuminated through tritium and tritium decay, and the way it excites gas in little tubes in there. So that I love that sort of technical piece. Mind you, this is also very finely executed and a rare and very special piece, in addition to the fact that it's a Sonograph. The red, I think, as many people may know, the red dial is the exact red that's used in Ferrari. This was a color that was given to F.P Journe, so is my understanding, by Jean Todt, who was the team principal at Ferrari at the time. And of course, there's three examples which actually have the Ferrari shield instead of the number 12. This is not one of those. One was Jean Todt's, which was at auction recently. The second is owned by F.P Journe, and the third was for Michael Schumacher, and is currently undelivered because he suffered his unfortunate accident before it could be delivered.
I actually have a fun story about that. A couple of years ago, I had the privilege to go to Switzerland and get a private tour of the case and dial manufacturer with Journe himself, who did the tour, because his son was actually on the tour with me. And he wanted to be there, and he wanted to go through the facility. And we got to the dial store area, where they have drawers of these dials that were prototype dials, and that were dials that were never used in watches, or maybe they are dials that were used and they're in there for archival purposes. However, he pulled open one drawer, and I saw a Ferrari red Sonograph dial with the Ferrari logo on it, and they told me that exact story that you just recounted, which was there were three of these dials made. One went to Jean Todt, the other went to Mr. Journe himself, and then the dial that was sitting right in the drawer happened to be for Michael Schumacher, which sadly was never delivered. But an amazing, amazing watch, and one that proudly has the Ferrari red on the dial. That there are, realistically, I'd love to know how many there are out there, but I can imagine extremely few of them with the red Ferrari paint.
Right, it's probably somewhere between 20 and 30 in total.
Incredible. I would just like to take a moment to thank our nearing 40,000 subscribers here on our Shreve Crumpelo YouTube channel. We are so excited to bring this content to you. Speaking of Ferrari and Ferrari red paint, you are also a bit of a car collector.
Well, yes, I don't collect that many, but I do have a Ferrari. There's a model of that on the table. It would be nice to think that I collect cars of that size. That could be a fun thing to do. But this is in fact a scale model of the actual Ferrari that I have, something you get when you get a Ferrari. And so I have a couple of also pieces on the table which have a matching dial color. They're both Rolex platinum watches, yes, which there's the Daytona here as well as the day date. You know, it's fun to wear a watch that matches your car. Interestingly about the day dates, the funny story there, a little bit of a theme in some of the pieces is the relative sort of, each piece is maybe a little bit unusual. The interesting thing about this watch is that it was delivered about 10 months after Rolex said they were going to discontinue the smooth bezel in the platinum day date, having just figured out how to make the fluted bezel in the platinum metal, which was the reason. Rather than being a sort of a distinguishing feature, it was the metal was not workable, and that's why it was done this way. But of course it became synonymous with the platinum metal. And I actually preferred it to the fluted bezel, and so I can only imagine this is one of the last platinum day dates that is with a smooth bezel that was produced.
And now obviously day dates are notorious for coming only in precious metals, so rose gold, white gold, platinum, yellow gold. You get the presidential bracelet, but then you can also get a fluted bezel or a smooth bezel. You know, one other unique thing about this is this specific platinum version comes with a diamond dial. Was that a consideration in the original thought behind buying it?
Well, you can get a few different variants of that ice blue dial. There's a laser etched version which doesn't have the baguettes on the dial. This was the one that was actually offered, but I think it's the one I would prefer over the laser etch. When I started, I thought maybe I preferred the laser etch, but when I saw it in person, I preferred the sort of simplicity of this dial. It's just, it has this lovely sort of radial, I guess, feature or brushing.
It's very elegant, and they used to make these day dates with diamond dials, but the way the diamonds were set, most of them were round brilliant cut. They'd set them with bulky prongs on the actual markers. These baguette markers are extremely elegant. They're set, almost invisibly set on the dial. There are still prongs that are holding them on there, but they're very difficult to see. And also I noticed your Platinum Daytona has a beautiful baguette dial, which is almost something for, as a collector, something that's a little bit more special for the collector, because it's not always evident if you're looking at it from a distance, right? You see that beautiful glacial blue dial, that ice blue dial, which signifies to anyone who knows about Rolex, okay, this is a platinum Rolex.
Yeah, exactly. So in a way, they're kind of a pair. Those who know and who will recognize it will know immediately what it is, but it also doesn't have the classic sort of panda Daytona look. So it may, for people who less know, it doesn't necessarily scream Rolex. It just looks like a chrono. So I sort of like that it's a little bit understated that way.
And which one of these do you wear most commonly when you're driving your ice blue Ferrari?
It's the Daytona.
Daytona.
Yeah.
Okay, very nice. So Tom, I want to talk a little bit about your early origins of collecting. You have two watches on the table that are, you know, unique.
You know, I think many of the guests here have watches that are special to them, may not be generally special. So this is one. This is maybe the first nice watch I bought. So this would have been in the early 90s. And I love this watch. I love the arrangement. It's a quartz watch. It's a Raymond Weil. It has a moon phase. It has a day date. And so it's a triple calendar. And I got so many compliments for this watch over the years. I wore it every day for at least 10 years. In fact, I wore it so many occasions, and maybe I'm a little not so careful, but I've smashed the crystal on this watch at least 6 times. Once, actually, it was in a car accident where the airbag blew off, and you know, my arm went through the window and smashed the glass. And you can see here, even on the back, that it was worn so much that the metal has worn down. So I just keep that because that, you know, it was an investment at the time for me. I think I paid like $400 for this which was at a time when I didn't have a lot of money, but I wanted a nice watch. And then this one here, so I work in biotechnology field, and in around 2009, we were starting a new company which we called 11 Biotherapeutics. It was a reference to This Is Spinal Tap, the movie, and it was fun. We had all the conference rooms were named after characters in the movie, and so when 2011 came by, and then particularly November 11th in 2011, which many people were calling Nigel Tufnell Day, which is a character in the movie because it's 11, 11, 11. We were asking ourselves, we're 11 Biotherapeutics, what are we going to do? So I designed this watch, which is it's a cheap quartz watch, but on the dial every number is 11. So it's 11 all the time. It's always 11. So that was, and of course, and then the logo's in the middle. So that was just a fun piece of amusement. But
so who did you go to develop this watch, or to customize the watch?
That's a good. I didn't choose the maker. Someone found someone who made sort of essentially blank watches and would put whatever dial you would want on there. So that's something one can have done.
So in the world of fine watches, the term piece unique gets thrown out quite a bit. And piece unique, by the way we define it, is a watch that is one of one, that will not be replicated and will not be in a collection. It's a special one-off piece, and not many collectors have a piece unique in their collection. So, we have one on the table here. Could you walk us through a little bit about how you came about it, and were you looking for it,
Sure. So when I was able to start collecting watches, I began looking for that Piaget Polo that was similar to the ones I had seen. And of course, now looking more systematically, there were so many different styles and designs out there. And they were all very much a forgotten model, a forgotten brand. This was well before the re-release, if you will, of the modernized mechanical polo. This was still the quartz polo, but this was when quartz was hip and cool in the late 70s and early 80s. And so this was purely for me. This was very much not sort of fashion driven or going with any kind of zeitgeist of the moment. This was entirely just something as me catching up on an old passion. And so there's a Swiss expert, Plus Ultra watches, and he's quite the Piaget expert collector. In any time you see reviews of Piaget, he's an authority that's consulted. And he had this watch as one of the Piagets he had, and I thought, oh, that's incredible. It was at a much higher price point than regular Piagets, I think, because he knew it was probably unique. So it's white gold, as is typical here, but with the yellow gold gadroons. So it's really quite a heavy piece as well. But on the dial, instead of being all onyx, as sometimes you find, or with the gadroons going through, here, between the gadroons, it's gone into mother of pearl. The watch went off the website. I was thinking, should I get it, should I get it, should I get it? And it went off the website, and I was so annoyed. I thought, I should have got it. But I didn't know that he takes them off from time to time and puts them back on the website to sort of refresh everybody. So as soon as it came back on, I jumped on it, and I got it. And the funny story here is I was in Watches and Wonders a couple of years ago, and I brought this to the Piaget boutique, and I got very excited. They confirmed that as far as they know, it's a pièce unique. It's the only one of its kind. And this was the new Polo had just been launched.
Polo 79.
The Polo 79 had just been launched, and I certainly tried that on. And the funny story here is the director of patrimony was in the private booth showing a client, and there was quite a few wanting to try it on, but he was showing a client the new 74, and he, as I came into the room and sat there just waiting because I wanted to just chat with him and talk to him about this watch, he saw the watch across the room, and he interrupted himself in dealing with the client to come over and gawk at the watch, and we started a conversation about the watch. And so after about 3, 4, 5 minutes, he said, I'm sorry, I have to go back to my client. So he goes back to the client. And after about 2 minutes in, he's still talking to me across the room, and then eventually leaves the client again and comes over. And then the client gets up and he's just going to leave. And he comes over and he says, "Can I at least see what all the fuss is all about?" And then he was out. But anyway, that was a fun experience. But this is just amazing. I love this watch. Of course, the crown is on the back. This is in the day where the quartz was custom made. And one of the interesting things I noticed only when I got the watch was that the minute hand does not advance on a continuous basis. It's sort of a little bit reminiscent of the Journe Elegant in the sense that it stops when you put it down. Here, the minute hand only advances every 20 seconds. So it's a way, I suspect, of preserving the battery power, but because it's counting and then only advances, there's only one movement, only one consumption, if you will, of energy every 20 seconds. And so that keeps the battery long-lived. But I love this watch. This is the watch that if suddenly this room was drowning, this is the watch I would grab off the table, even though there's the Centigraph F there. But this is the one I would take.
Very special watch.
Yeah.
Yeah. And very relevant design and aesthetic today, obviously.
Yeah, it's amazing how it's come back.
So, you've lived in Boston now for how long, Tom?
For about 30 years.
30 years. So, and you've been collecting now for probably the past...
Really only for the past 4 years.
Okay. And are there, would you say that there's a good community here in Boston and, locally in the Northeast that you feel you can lean on and maybe tap on for guidance or, consulting?
Yeah, I think there's an awesome community here. So, one of the most important things I think is to see watches in person. And over the last few years, more and more stores have shown up here on the street, so it's possible to see multiple different brands. But when you get enthusiasts together who bring the fruits of all their collecting in one place, you see such an incredible diversity of watches, and it's really mind-expanding in terms of what you can be exposed to. But also there's that tremendous joy in sharing passion with like-minded people who appreciate the beauty of the watch, the history of brands, and the nuances of different executions of a particular series. It's a hobby for sure, but I think it's also a very enriching hobby. It's a very engaging hobby. And it's very easy to see why many people start out small and then, really fall down the rabbit hole.
End up with a table of over a dozen watches.
And end up with a table of dozen watches. Mind you, I have to feel that, in some ways I was biding my time to really be at a point where I felt I could afford to collect the pieces I was interested in. Up until recently, the focus was on, saving for other things, for, just sort of regular life. But I'm very fortunate to have recently been in a position where I could pursue the passion to a greater depth.
I mean, I just love your entire collection so much because it's so diverse. It's not just about one series of watches from one brand. It's nice to see that there is an array of different brands represented on the table here today that really showcases watchmaking from many different, fine watchmaking houses.
Yeah, I mean, there's a great sort of through line, a story here on the table, and it starts over here with this UN Ulysse Great White. This was a watch that was released a few years ago, a limited edition of 300, and before I got into biotechnology, when as a kid, I wanted to be a marine biologist, which I think many kids wanted to be at the time, Jacques Cousteau and all that sort of stuff. I learned to dive actually when I was 15, so the idea of a great white, and it's got this beautiful embossed great white. It looks pretty massive, but it's titanium. It's actually quite light. I thought this was awesome, so I got that, and then I discovered that it's not the first shark watch that UN had. That they had previously issued a limited edition of a hammerhead shark, and that was not available from dealers. There are so few of these, only 99, that I hunted for maybe 18 months before I even found an example online. And so I got this piece, and this is now quite massive because this is in the rose gold. But I love this, and there's such tremendous detailing on the dial. There are little embossed hammerhead sharks, in addition to a red hammerhead shark in the hour counter, and it's got a display case back, which is, I think, relatively unusual for a dive watch, I began to develop a fondness for UN. And so when we went to Watches and Wonders, we visited the booth, and I had become aware of the Freak as being such an iconic watch, and I thought, wow, if I'm into UN, I should get a Freak. And I was looking at maybe I should get one of the original first series. And that year, when we were at Watches and Wonders, they'd been releasing other versions, but they released the Freak One just that year. And so we were due to go into the store, and so they had an example there. And so this is the Freak One here. And it was exciting because it went back to the original idea of the Freak. Some of the more modern Freaks had crowns, and this has gone back to no crown. It winds from the back with a grinder system. You lift this, this tag here, and that can rotate the entire movement, and you set the watch that way. And I thought this was just incredible. I had to have it. Put in an order, but they were saying, well, you're one of the first, you can have a low number, the numbers will be serial numbers, it's not a limited edition, but we're not going to make very many of them. In a moment, I thought they might consider it fun. I thought if the Freak idea here is to be thinking out of the box and being very different. And so instead of asking for a particular integer, I asked for a decimal for the serial number. So it's 3.14, which is pi, of course, relates to the circle. And they actually had to call through to head office to see whether they would be willing to do that. And they did, and so here it is. But when they delivered the watch, they said, we're not going to do that again. So not only would it be a unique number in any case, but it's doubly unique because it will be the only decimal numbered Freak.
Very unique story with the Freak. That seems to be, an invisible thread throughout your collection is, you really hunt for these more, esoteric and idiosyncratic details with the watches that you're looking for.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's perhaps a little bit my personality. It's one of the reasons why I love the Essence. This is the Type 3, but it's the Type 3 BBB for triple black. So it's black above and below, and the case, such as it is also in anodized titanium here. I believe it's titanium. So this was only made in the year 2022. When I spoke to Essence directly, they said they had made only 87 of these that year. It's amazing. Most people think this is a digital display, and for those of you who don't know it, it's an oil-filled upper chamber, and it refracts light. It has the exact same refractive index as the crystal. And so when the light hits the dial and you're looking at it, it does not appear like you're looking at the dial. The dial appears to be projected on the underside of the crystal. And that gives us this most amazing sort of pebble-like look, but it's completely mechanical. And the loom is great. Of course, everything that's on here is white, is loomed. Mm-hmm. And as it moves, and I think we can move it around. You can see the mechanism of how that goes around. It's really fun to watch during the day. Normally, it's a little bit like a regulator style dial. You normally know roughly what hour it is, and then of course the minute hand is keenly there. One of these other subdials is also the temperature. So it's designed for to measure the temperature on the wrist, because as the oil expands, there are bellows inside here which will compensate to allow for the expansion of the oil, so there's no air in the chamber. So even as it changes temperature, it can stay completely filled. So it's a kind of simple idea, but with all these different fascinating innovations, I think is what make the orbital movement there so unique.
An incredibly creative and ingenious caliber.
Yeah.
The whole collection from Resonance is an amazing feat of engineering.
Another quirk is this AP here that I picked up during the last Olympic Games. Very fortunate for this piece actually to be in the store at that time. And why this appealed to me is because it's actually in the green and gold colors. So when Australia competes internationally, the athletes are dressed in green and gold, which is the traditional colors in Australia. It's actually very much like Brazil. But it's funny because the flag in Brazil has green and gold in it, but not in the case of Australia. But the green and gold, the Australians dress that way because that is the color of the national flower. So they actually dressed like a flower and not in the colors of the flag.
And this is in the Paris Summer Olympics that just occurred.
And this was in the Paris Summer Olympics. So that's when I got this, and I really love code. I know it's obviously controversial, but this has this lovely stamped dial here, and just the balance between the gold elements, the subdials, and the white here. It's just incredibly aesthetically pleasing to me, and so I've worn this many times.
A very elegant and well executed dial on that code. Thank you so much for joining us today for our exclusive collector-to-collector interview with Dr. Thomas Barnes. It's been a lot of fun. We look forward to seeing you here next time.